Welcome to the Birds and the Bees podcast. This is Braxton Dutson.
That's the key. People aren't talking about it.
Everybody needs to know that porn is not a documentary.
It's not like if we don't talk to kids about sex and sexuality, they're not going to hear about it. They're just not going to hear about it from us.
They have tons of questions, they just don't know how to ask them.
All you have to do is be one chapter ahead. You don't have to know everything. Just one chapter ahead of wherever your child is.
Hey everyone, this is Braxton Dutson, your host of Birds and Bees podcast. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and certified sex therapist in Salt Lake City, Utah. This podcast is meant to bring you information from top professionals in relational and sexual health. I want you to have all the tools, tips, and tricks you need to improve your relationship with your partner, feel confident in teaching your children about sexual health, and know that none of us are alone in these experiences. Today we're going to be doing that by bringing on Robbert and Kelsey. Now, they're here to talk to us today about their relationship that has really been from the ashes to the phoenix. Their relationship has gone through enmeshment, avoidance, pornography, bankruptcy, emotional abuse, verbal abuse, and really having this idea of what the fairy tale relationship is supposed to look like and how that was damaging their relationship in the long run, and everything they had to go through to get to a place where they were able to continue the relationship, even in the face of a looming divorce. It's important to know that this interview is not meant to be another added ounce of pressure on relationships where you feel as though the relationship is over and it needs to be done, and then here's this podcast or story that is saying we have to keep moving forward. If you're in a relationship that you're feeling that is over and done and you've been doing the work to get to there, it's important that you go through your own story and not compare yours to Robbert and Kelsey or anyone else's to that matter. We're not trying to give marital advice to continue or to end a relationship. This is a story for everyone to hear what their experience was and to give hope and encouragement, but it is also not to give extra pressure onto staying in a relationship that you need to or you feel like you need to be out of. That is between you, the person you're with, as well as a therapist or other helpers in your life. They wanted listeners to know that this is not to add pressure to all relationships to stay the same. They said that this was perfect for their relationship. It was the right choice for them. This does not mean it's the right choice for everyone. Thank you so much again for sharing these episodes with friends and family, as well as writing reviews on iTunes. It helps the podcast so much. One of the reviews I wanted to share with you is from S. Morley77. They state, "This is seriously the best podcast if you are looking for something to talk about healthy sexuality that is not grotesque. He has such a great, unique outlook on it all. Highly recommended for all. Heart face, heart face, heart face." Thanks so much, S. Morley77. I really appreciate you listening to the podcast. I love you, and I love all the listeners who are here supporting me and my goal in getting sexual health out to everybody and letting us know that we're all in this together. None of us are perfect, but we're all here doing our best, and you've got the support. You can do this. We're on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, and now iHeartRadio, whoop, whoop, which is really cool. And let me know if you've got any thoughts, any questions about the episode. Please give me a call or text at 385-449-1818. And without any further ado, let's get to the interview. Appreciate you tuning in. Love you so much. Thank you for being a part of the Hive. Welcome to the Birds and Bees podcast. This is Braxton Dutson, and today I'm here with Robbert and Kelsey. Welcome to the show, Robbert.
Thank you.
It's good to have you here. Kelsey?
Hey.
We did a podcast, I believe it was episode 23. I want to say it was episode 23 with Nate Bagley. And Nate Bagley was talking about relationships, and Kelsey reached out to me and said, "Hey, we've done a vast majority of these things, and I just want to tell you that they do work. This is great." And I wanted to have them come on and tell their story. So I really appreciate you both being out here to talk on Birds and Bees. I'm really excited to get into your story, because what you've been telling me is you guys have gone through so many different hardships, not just one or two that have really been foundational rocking, but we're talking emotionally, financially, sexually, and mentally, all really difficult challenges that have affected your relationship to the point that it was sometimes you'd questioned if you were going to continue on in the relationship. Is that right?
Yeah, that's pretty accurate.
Yeah.
Yeah, it feels like sometimes every day we look at each other. We're still in this, right? Yeah, okay. All right, just touching back.
I'm curious about how did you guys end up meeting? Robert gives the nod. Go ahead, honey.
Yeah, right? Because he knows he gets in trouble every time he shares it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, I tell the accurate story, and then she tells her version, and it kind of goes from there, but we all know the truth.
If I let him, he'll tell you how I was infatuated with him. But realistically, we grew up together. We grew up in a little hometown, and we were in church. I mean, his dad was one of my church leaders. His mom was my other one, and his brothers were my age, and I was very close with them. So I was the little brother's friend who was always there and annoying him because I am very extroverted. I am peppy. I am, if a unicorn could shit a rainbow, it'd be me. And he is very much on the other side of things. And we fought all the time. We rode in the car on the way to school in the mornings, and there was one morning where he locked me in the trunk. And I was so angry, and his mom was yelling at him as he walked off to class, and I was going to be late for AP Bio, and I was pissed. But somewhere in all of that, we both matured enough. I think it was really, physical maturity counts for a lot, guys. So he left for boot camp with the Marine Corps and got back and looked really nice in a suit. And that time away made him realize I looked pretty good too. And so we went to a dance together, and after that, he was besotted.
Wow. How long were you in the Marine Corps for?
4.5 years.
4.5 years? Wow.
Yeah. It was a good time. Blow stuff up, shoot stuff all the time.
Yeah, what were you,
So I specialized in demolitions and rocket launchers in the Marine Corps.
Nice.
And so we did 2 tours to Iraq, and we were the guys that would set the charges on the door before we go in, or blow something up with a rocket launcher here and there and go out and have a good time.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I've got a buddy that does the same thing, or was doing the same thing. He's not in the Marines anymore, but he says it's all sorts of fun to launch missiles and, I guess man, I really suck at it explaining what you guys blow up, but it sounds super cool.
It's a lot of fun, and unlike now, I didn't have to pay for my rounds when I went out shooting, so it didn't hurt as much to go shooting on the weekends.
Mm-hmm. You can go out and go shoot and to get better and have a good time.
Exactly.
That is a good time. Does that sound accurate the way that she's describing, or is what's your story on this? I mean,
she's leaving out a pretty big crush that she had on me in high school, but other than that and her poor taste in country music, it's pretty accurate.
Oh my gosh.
So you knew that she had a crush on you, or was that through the grapevine?
It was discovered later in the relationship.
Oh my gosh. So you're done. He did not marry me for my ability to keep a clean house. So let's get that out in the open right now. Because he used to come over and clean my bedroom on the weekends so my parents would let him take me out on a date.
Working for a date.
Yes. And so in that cleaning, he found a letter from a friend talking about how, trying to help me through how frustrated I was that there was this guy named Robert who kept annoying me and teasing me, and what had I ever done to deserve so much hatred. That was it. There was no professions of love, none of it, but he was very excited to find this letter.
Sounded promising, I guess.
Yeah, we all can read between the lines, so we know what that kind of language meant.
Oh my gosh.
Oh man. So what moved you guys to the next level of serious dating into marriage?
That was when he got delayed. He was supposed to deploy to Iraq, and they switched what company you were in, right? Battalion. So sorry. But battalion. And so that gave us more time to date, and which he sorely needed because I was adamant about not falling in love.
Oh. So you were fighting the love.
I did not want to settle down. I wanted to get married later in life, and I wanted to get through schooling and traveling the world and all sorts of adventures, and I didn't want a ball and chain.
Fair enough. It's pretty hard to travel the world with a ball and chain.
It definitely is. Perspective is everything, I guess. Mm-hmm. But, we'd made a commitment that where we were at in our lives, it was nothing serious. It was a good time, some fun, and then things changed. She went off to college, and I didn't end up deploying for another 6 months, and we got to know each other a little bit more, got a little more serious. And
he's making light of it, but he worked hard to sell himself. Like, he sold it hard.
Yeah.
He would show up and woo my roommates. He would bring bags and bags of groceries, order pizza for them, take all of us out on nights out on the town. And they were always so excited when he came. And if I ever started having another guy come around, they'd just start hissing and booing from the corners.
It wasn't Robbert?
It wasn't Robbert.
it happens. The true way to a woman's heart is through her friends.
Fair enough.
Food. And food.
And food.
And food. And if you get her friends food, it's a win-win.
Way to go, Robbert.
That's what we do.
So you had it. What was your proposal story?
So we'd woken up and gone to church one morning. I'd come out to Utah. I was still stationed in California. And while in church, I snuck away to get to her apartment complex. And I went in and put candles everywhere.
Disclaimer, please don't do this. It's a fire hazard.
There were fire sprinklers in there. We were fine. But put candles everywhere and flowers everywhere, and then snuck back to church so she wouldn't notice that I was missing that. When we came back and we got into the apartment, everything would be all set up and ready to rock and roll. And I remember it was right around Valentine's Day, so the flowers were definitely not cheap, but they did seal the deal, so it worked out pretty well.
Nice. So you come into the room, you see candles.
I look at him and I say, "Can I please go put my stuff down first?"
It's what every guy dreams of hearing after he asks.
So you hadn't asked yet. Come on. And so you led me to the center of the room and you told me how you understood that my dream was to get engaged or married at the Huntington Gardens in Los Angeles, and you couldn't take me to them, but you could bring the flowers to me. So he had covered everything with flowers, and I thought that was very sweet, and I said yes.
So you could read between the lines when all the candles were there, and then the smooth talking came in to seal the deal.
Yep.
Nice. Wow. So then when did you guys, you get married?
A year later.
A year later.
Yeah, he had to deploy again.
Okay.
So
Oh, yeah,
I
'cause
planned
this is all right before the deployment.
Right. So I planned the wedding with his mom.
Okay.
It was fantastic. I highly recommend it. I got back from my last deployment and got married 30 days later, so all I had to do was get fitted for a tux.
It was the most
Right
romantic time of my life. Honestly, all I wanted was you. I just wanted you there. And so I felt so bad for your mom because she wanted me desperately to engage in making these decisions. And she'd hold up papers like, which one do you want for the invite? And I would just, that one, just so that she'd have a decision made, because I didn't care. I had so many days till you were home, and that's what I was counting down to.
The whole important part was that Robbert was here.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it was really exciting. I mean, everybody was focused on it. Everybody wanted to hear about it. And all that excitement, that buildup, I couldn't focus on anything else. Our wedding was really well attended, our wedding reception. And we had people show up in droves. I mean,
Wow.
It was ridiculous. And we were overwhelmed by the amount of support we had. But we realized that we were kind of this embodiment of the fairy tale that we believed ourselves to be for everyone else. They saw that in us and they hoped it was true, and we hoped it surely was true. Mm-hmm. And we were just high on life that day. I mean, we were the last people at our reception. We were just dancing. Mm-hmm. And it was beautiful. It felt like a real Cinderella moment, although Cinderella doesn't have much of a voice in that movie, so I kind of think she's lame. But
No, she didn't speak too much.
No, she doesn't. But, that fairy tale, it felt like it was the culmination of this epic fairy tale romance where we waded through the war for each other.
Wow. Did it feel like that for you, Robbert?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't too focused on the home part. I was pretty busy focusing on what I was going through at the time, but it was nice to go through it and know I had someone on the other side that was there waiting for me. And, it's hard going through those deployments. There's a pretty high statistic of men that go off to fight war, and at one point during their conflict, their significant other, their spouse, their girlfriend ends up leaving them or not being faithful or one thing or another, and it's a pretty heartbreaking thing to come home to. So
You were terrified.
Yeah, it happened
That's
plenty.
terrifying. Yeah.
Even within the small 30-person group that I was a part of, it was a pretty high statistic.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
So it was nice to know that that's not what I was coming home to.
Yeah.
So it was. It became that fairy tale place,
Yeah.
that experience.
It set some pretty unrealistic expectations for the rest of our
Really?
life. Yeah.
When did you start running into those unrealistic expectations?
It wasn't long into it. I'd say probably the first month when we realized we didn't know how to fight.
You know, it's rough. We dated, including our engagement, probably close to 3 years. But
Which
how
is
much of that
very
time-
short a time, very long a time period for our circle of friends. So we thought we were marriage experts because we had been together for 3 whole years. So
Right.
But the majority of that time was spent over phone call or text or letters. You know, out of that 3 years, I spent 14 months in Iraq. I spent countless months stationed in California while she was going to school in Utah. So there wasn't a whole lot of face-to-face. So when you were face-to-face, the last thing you wanted to do was fight or argue about something. You wanted to cherish those moments, and nothing else mattered.
yeah.
Wow. So in that first month, there's an argument that comes up. Was it? Do you guys remember it, or you just remember that it was a pretty big?
I just remember that it was big. I remember the feeling of hopelessness for where was this epic romance? Where was my partner? Where's Robbert? As he's running from me, from this pain that is only building the more he tries to elude the conversation. And I'm chasing emotionally. I mean, it was this tiny... How big was our apartment, babe?
It's 500 square feet in Southern California.
So understand when I say chase.
$15,000 a month in rent.
It wasn't very far.
It's one room to the other side of the kitchen.
Yeah, but the sobbing and the late hours and the neighbors banging on the walls telling us to be quiet and him storming out. I think that was the night that you stormed out and forgot that you're 6'3" and didn't bend far enough to get in the car and bounced off the car, and we had to take you to urgent care for a concussion.
Oh, ow. So it was pretty
Yeah.
intense. That was a big blowout.
And the first of many.
And the first of many.
Yeah.
So you didn't know how to fight. Can you tell me a little bit more about what you mean by you didn't know how to fight?
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, growing up when I saw my parents fight, it was my dad he would have the strongest voice in what was happening. And my mother would be quiet because they wouldn't want to fight in front of the children. And so we'd hear him just blow up, and then they'd go off into a back room, shut the door, and hash it out however they wanted, and we never saw anything else.
Okay.
And then in my personal interactions with my parents, it was very much the same. My dad would blow up at me, we'd fight. He and I are very alike, so it would be very mutual. And then he would go off and my mother would come in and settle me down and apologize on his behalf, and everything would go okay. My mom wasn't there in our marriage to apologize on his behalf.
Wow. So there's been a buffer that you grew up with.
Yes.
Any thoughts on that, Robert?
I mean, it sounds pretty accurate. I try and think back to my parents growing up, and we didn't see a whole lot of fighting. My dad always had kind of a short temper, but not a whole lot of fighting between him and my mom, and definitely nothing in front of us. They were pretty quiet, pretty reserved people, and we didn't get to see a whole lot of that side of it.
In the 1 year I lived with your parents while you were deployed, what I would notice is that your dad would have that short temper, and your mother would kind of absorb that and teary-eyed go off to her bedroom and process that, and then come out when she was fine. So I don't feel like in either of our childhoods we ever saw what it's like to talk through or fight, and actually fight, like two people face to face, other than TV.
Yeah.
So really the media was kind of the way that you learned how to fight and make up.
And maybe that's why I'm so dramatic. Yeah.
So you learn in the first month that, okay, this is a new way of having to deal with issues. And was there a way that you guys worked through that, or did that continue on as things started to progress?
I think it just continued on more and more.
It got worse.
Yeah. It was just like a snowball rolling from the top of a mountain, just got bigger and bigger and bigger until it eventually just destroyed whatever it hit.
Yeah. What we later found out was that you were flooded with emotion And you would get to a place where you would just numb out to deal with it. And so then I'm begging for you to show me anything. This person who had spent years professing his love for me, I wanted you to show me anything. And it was like you were completely checked out and gone. And the only emotion you were comfortable showing was anger.
Wow.
Yeah, anger and silence. I mean, those are the two, from all my life experiences and everything I'd been through, it's just easier to forget it, think to myself, this will pass, it'll go away, and move on to the next thing.
I spent our first anniversary crying alone on the living room floor while you slept in the bedroom. You woke up that morning and went and got me flowers and a card with a picture of a donkey on it that said, "Sorry for being an ass."
We still have the vase.
We do still have
the face.
Yeah.
So it had gotten to a place where even within that first year, so was there a fight about the anniversary, or was it just things continued and a fight just happened to be the day before the anniversary?
What I notice about myself is that when I experience prolonged sustained trauma, I don't remember details. So I just know that it happened, and I can tell you how it felt and what the physical behaviors were at the time. But as far as the details of the fight, your better luck is with him knowing.
Fair enough.
And that's not the best odds, because I can go to bed pissed after fighting and yelling and screaming for hours and wake up and not remember anything and be happy as a clam, and
which
go
would
on
start
with
the
life.
fight over again.
Which would start it going. Okay.
And it's just a vicious cycle. I got to a point in our marriage that I had to start writing down what the fight was about before I went to bed, so that when I wake up I could read my notes and remember why I'm pissed or what I did, or
So that it wouldn't restart an issue instead of being like, why are we so mad?
yeah.
Wow.
Well, why is she mad? I was fine.
Because why are you, okay, so why is she mad?
Yeah.
Wow. And so that would continue on. And how long have you guys been together?
10 years.
So we've been married for 10 years.
Married for 10 years,
Together
3
13.
dating, 13. Wow. So that first year, we're learning, okay, we have no idea how to fight. What are the years after that? They continued to escalate since then.
They continued to escalate in many different ways. I mean, physically, you started hitting walls, throwing things, breaking things, which is where I started getting terrified every time we fought. And let's see. Then we started getting to a place where not only were we fighting and yelling at each other, but then there was a lot of verbal and emotional abuse happening. And it didn't help that year 2, I got pregnant with twins.
Wow.
When I didn't even want to be married yet. Right? That wasn't in my life plan. And then to find out I was pregnant with 2 babies was huge.
That is huge.
We're still to this day shell-shocked by that one.
It's still a shell shocker.
They're 8 and very helpful with the younger siblings. And thankfully, we have a much better relationship. But when they were babies, it took me a long time to connect with them, in part because of that pregnancy, how terrified I was of them.
You were terrified of your twins.
Yeah, I was. It was like they were going to eat me or something. But there was also this background I had with my father, where sometimes I'd go and I'd visit him at work. And there was one time in particular I remember where I came in and a woman had walked out right as I walked into his office. And he pointed to the door and he said, "Did you see that woman on her way out?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "I am doing my best to help her, but I don't know what I can do. She doesn't have a degree. She has no skill set that I can put to work. And she is asking for me to give her a discount on my services so that she can have a way to provide for her family. But that is what happens when you have babies young."
Wow.
And I was 21. Was I 21 by that point? I was 21 and pregnant with those words running through my head.
Wow.
And I also remembered him telling me that sometimes a woman will decide to get pregnant to fix a bad marriage, and it just makes it worse. And all I could think was, I wasn't even trying to do this, and it's going to make a bad marriage 10 times worse. and that I did it. I ruined it. And that seemed to be a big theme of how I felt personally in our marriage, was that I kept ruining this fairy tale we were supposed to have.
You started with the fairy tale, and it has just progressively gotten worse, and you felt like you were making it worse.
Yeah.
Every action you were doing. Mm-hmm. Wow. And Robert, what was going through your mind during those first couple of years? I mean, then she tells you she's pregnant with twins.
Not a whole lot, if we're being 100% honest here. We were going through our own struggles at that point, and a lot of it had to do with us being in a religion that I wasn't necessarily bought into. I hadn't been practicing, but I got into it because that's what she was, and if we wanted to be together, that's what needed to be working. And that brought a lot of issues early on in our marriage about a lot of shame, a lot of guilt of things that we had done, things that we were doing, that we wouldn't be good enough, and now we're bringing kids into this, and now they're going to be negatively impacted. So a lot going on at this point, pretty early in the marriage, that's already on pretty rocky ground.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. I was highly religious, and ever since your second deployment, I had felt like God hated me. And so to be highly religious and feel like I was constantly begging for the love of this higher being who I felt actually hated me, put me in this place, it was just a bad place. And then I was constantly looking at you and wanting you to be what made the difference when you weren't even bought into the religion. So it was, oh my goodness, was it complicated?
It was good times.
Sounds really complicated. It sounds like there's so much scrambling for connection.
Yeah.
That was going on, and it was hard to know where that connection was at.
Yeah. And I would say that it wasn't until we hit year 3, because I kept remembering and saying it to myself, this is just the beginning. Everybody says the first 3 years of marriage are hard, and then if you can make it past that, everything's great. So this is just what everybody else went through, right? Not realizing, no, it's not normal. It may be common in some instances, but it's not normal to experience verbal abuse, emotional abuse, financial abuse. And it's not normal to be fighting all the time. I mean, we sat with a therapist once who told us, so it sounds like you're either fighting or you're having sex. Like, yeah, because we both still desperately love each other. But we just couldn't connect.
Wow, so very opposing experiences is what that therapist pointed out.
Yeah.
That's intense. You say when you're talking about financial abuse, emotional abuse, what are you speaking to? Can you talk to that?
So a lot of it came from, being in the military. It was a guaranteed paycheck, 1st and the 15th of every month. Didn't learn a whole lot of budgeting. So we transitioned from the military. Now we're a married couple. She was going to school, and we were trying to make ends meet. So we turned to credit cards for a lot, for just basic purchases, how to pay utilities. And then from there it progressed to, I wanted to have the same lifestyle that we had before. So I want to go out to eat here and there. Christmas was a big thing in my family where we got lots of gifts.
We fought so hard that first Christmas.
So I had gone out and spent just tons of money buying her all the things that I knew she wanted.
I got bored opening gifts.
Yeah.
Wow.
And just buying things to take care of her in the way that I knew to take care of someone, or the way that I'd thought started another fight. So it got to a point where it was just putting money after money on credit cards. And we didn't have a whole lot of fun things to show for it. We didn't have nice cars. We didn't have giant TVs or cool furniture or anything fun. It was just living well beyond our means. And then you fast forward to having our twins, who ended up being born not on insurance. And it was just the perfect storm of not paying the bills the way I should have been. I was taking care of the finances 100%, not having the same income for the lifestyle that we were living, and it just all came to a head pretty quickly.
Well, and it's a little bit more than that, because I wasn't allowed to see the bills. I wasn't allowed to log in. I didn't even have the login. And you worked at a bank. And so if I went to a bank and asked to see what was happening with my own finances, I risked outing you to your employer and their employees. So I felt very much stuck. I mean, I remember being home and the electricity getting turned off. I remember having the water shut off and because I couldn't breastfeed, having to go next door to the neighbor and asking for water to make formula bottles. Like I experienced a lot of trauma just because I didn't know what was going on financially in my own life. And the first time I really got a glimpse at what was happening was when you told me that it was time to declare bankruptcy. When I had been very frugal my whole life and our whole marriage, I had been shopping at DI because I knew we were young and poor, and so assumed that we were trying to live within our means.
Wow, so there's some betrayal that you felt at that point in time, and
oh my gosh, we went through so much betrayal.
wow.
Yeah, you wouldn't think things that you can come back from. I just remember being so angry and just sobbing into the phone with my dad. Sobbing and yelling and being angry and just saying, he's a liar, and my dad saying, okay, yes. Do you want me to tell you you're right? You're right. But now what? What are you going to do about that? Does that mean you're gone? And I had to sit there and sit with that and think about what it did mean. And the fact that he had lied to me could be true, and at the same time, it could also be true that I was still willing to stay and try and figure this out.
Wow. And at the same time, you had said that you were also working through some prenatal and postnatal depression.
Yes.
Was that with these twins?
I mean, it did happen with the twins, but I didn't know what it was.
Oh, wow.
And so their pregnancy was very dark. I describe it as sitting in a dark room in the corner, feeling like these hands just of anxiety and depression reaching out towards me, and me just trying to make myself into as small a ball as possible to stay away from them. And that was the whole pregnancy. And then the postpartum, I felt so much shame. And now when I cry about it, it's not because of the shame. I cry about it because I think back to that younger version of myself, and I wish I could take care of her because she deserved it. But I remember vividly lying on the couch and looking at the twins, and one of them in a bouncer and one of them in a swing, and them crying, and I could see the pee dripping from their diapers. I could see how dirty everything was. I could see that they hadn't been washed or changed in way too long, and they were hungry and just begging for me and not having it in me to even look at them.
And on top of that, being in a neighborhood that was kind of remote and out of the way, only having one car for the household, which I took to work with me, so literally just having her landlocked, stuck in a place where there wasn't even a sidewalk that you could walk next to a busy highway type of road.
Wow.
So literally just isolated and locked in.
And I didn't have any of my family, and I grew up in a big Hispanic family. Mm-hmm. And so when my mom had her babies, I remember everybody moving in. Mm-hmm. My tias, my tios, my Lita, everybody, they came and they moved in and they took care of us. They fed us, they bathed us, they took care of her, they took care of the babies, and it was wonderful. And I realized the help wasn't coming.
Mm-hmm. That wasn't your experience.
No, it was nowhere. And you were working way too much at that point. You were compensating for your inability to connect with me with your success at work. And so he was gone working like 50 hours a week when I had newborn twins at home. Mm-hmm. And it's not that he was afraid of the kids, because he'd come home and it was like I was off the clock, then he was on the clock. Mm-hmm. Because he would stay up all night with them. He'd hold them, he'd feed them, he'd change them. He had the sweetest relationship with them, and from day one. And that's what he wanted to be doing. And so I knew it wasn't them, it was me.
Mm. Like the relationship? Does that sound accurate, Robert?
Yeah, I mean, as weird as it sounds, it's a lot easier to deal with a baby that's crying and change a diaper and get them a little bit more under control and taken care of than it is with some emotional scars that you've created over the last 2 to 3 years. Mm-hmm. And so it'd be easy to send her to bed and then stay up all night, take care of the kids, have some peace and quiet, get caught up on some other things, and still not have to deal with the root of the issue, and hope that maybe if she had enough quiet time to herself or enough relaxing time that she'd wake up and everything would be just fine.
Mm-hmm. Really hoping it would change the situation, just if there was enough sleep or if there was enough, that it would work itself out.
And I love what you said about the scars that you had created, because that's very true. Each new thing was just another layer on an old scar. So my trauma made it so that every time I responded to you when something went wrong, it wasn't just instance A that I was upset about. I was also upset simultaneously about A, B, C, D, E, F, all the way down the lane. And so you felt like you were in between a rock and a hard place, because you couldn't do it right no matter what, because you were dealing with all the ghosts of what you had done in the past.
Yeah.
Yeah. About comes to that, you try and do something, and then it just didn't fix everything. It was too much. Yeah. Did it ever get to a place where you both were saying, you know what, we need to call it off? Or, you know, if something doesn't change, all these scars are going to end this?
Yeah, fast forward 5 years. Fast forward about 5 years, and different problems have come up. Same type of situation. At this point in our marriage, we've probably been to about a dozen different therapists.
Like 2.
Which can feel like a dozen.
Somewhere between 2 and 12. We'll say that. So we've been to some out-of-state, some in-state, some that were religious focused, some that were not, and each one giving a little bit different advice, and nothing that really seemed to be working at this point. And a series of events had happened, and
my pregnancy with that escalated it.
Yeah, got pregnant with our 3rd kid, and everything just started compounding again. And it all came to head when it was another, one of the things that I'd struggled with a ton at this point, from our religious perspective, was a pornography addiction. And had all come to head with her finding more pictures, and more stuff just kind of compounding on top of each other. And it just came to a head where we went and saw a religious leader and sat down and said, hey, based on what we found, or based on what she had found, because each time it was discovered by her, this is the part where we're done. So what do we do? And getting some of the advice from him kind of led us to where we started to turn one of our first corners.
Yeah, that was one of our first corners.
Was talking to that religious leader?
Yeah, it was the first time I'd had a male authority figure tell me, you have done enough. You are well within your rights to be done if you want to. And you're well within your rights to continue if you want to. What do you want? It helped me, instead of feeling like the victim of so much pain and trauma, it instead made me feel powerful. And like, again, I was the lead in my own story again.
Wow.
Because we'd had some therapists that would say, well, have sex with him more often and that'll fix all the problems. Or
really
be a better homemaker and that'll fix all the problems. Or,
mind you, I have a much higher libido than him, so joke's on them.
So you were wanting and pushing for sex this entire time.
Yeah. And feeling very, very, what's that word?
Rejected.
Yes, rejected.
And for her, it was a big sense of connection and how we got closer together. And for me, it was just a release, and probably just a release from all the stress that was going on, all the anxiety, the unhappy life.
And again, why wouldn't you want that? You could totally, it would have been helpful. But yeah.
Which in society, that's what's saying, like, wow, what a blessing of a curse to have there, Robert. A woman that wants to have sex with you all the time, but it wasn't doing what you needed at the time, or it wasn't creating that connection. At the same time, you're saying that having her go to bed and be asleep and you taking care of everything else was more of a peaceful feeling for you at those points in time, because there was so much pain associated with the relationship.
It was something I knew that give it enough time and I could figure it out, and by the end of it I could see the results and everything would be better.
Mm-hmm.
We've learned with you that for me, the connection comes during and after sex. For you, the connection has to happen before. And so where we spent so many years where we weren't connected, no wonder.
There wasn't much of a drive for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that seems to be quite common in relationships.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you start turning this corner where people have told you have more sex, be more a better homemaker, all these things. Now all of a sudden you feel a sense of power of you can leave if you want to, and you're deciding to stay.
Yeah.
And Robert, what was going on for you?
It was never something that I wanted to end at this point. It's, had the wife, had kids. If things had gotten much harder earlier in our marriage when we didn't have kids, it would have been a lot cleaner. We would have stopped. We would have broke it off, and that would have been clean. But once you start having kids, it makes it all that much more complicated. So at that point, I wanted to preserve the family that we had created.
The family was important.
And so it was just a matter of what can I do at the same time feeling what am I capable of doing in order to keep this all together.
And mind you, I had just had a baby 30 days before.
30 days before this meeting with...
Yes.
Is this the third child?
Baby number 3.
This is baby number 3.
Twins and a baby number 3.
Yeah. And baby number 3, the pregnancy, I had experienced extreme prenatal depression and anxiety to the point where I was suicidal. And then got on medication for the postpartum of that. And oh my goodness, was it a night and day difference? I was me again, and which I was very grateful for, since 30 days later, obviously, we ran. Oh, I couldn't imagine having been stuck in that place of depression and anxiety and dealing with all that.
Wow. So you were working with someone or getting some support? Where were you getting your support at?
I was seeing an OB who I adored, and he retired right after delivering my baby. And I told him what I was experiencing, and in loose terms, because I was still too ashamed to tell him that I had been suicidal. And so in loose terms, I told him how I was feeling. And so he worked with me on getting on the right dosage of Zoloft, and it made everything night and day difference. Everything was different after that.
Wow. It changed everything.
Yeah. And, I kept reading online that people were worried about trying medication like that because they wanted to still be them. And what I realized is that for me, it lifted the fog so I could finally be me again. Mm-hmm. And that was where the power in it came, is because I wasn't so weighed down by fear, by sadness, by emotions. Instead, all that was lifted and I could see clearly. And even to this day, when I start to get confused by what's happening around me, that's when I can realize that my anxiety, because I do have a general anxiety disorder, and I can realize that it's gotten out of control and it's time to start focusing on taking care of that and managing it again.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So you see your triggers and your signs in that.
Yeah.
What, this was this big turn in the corner, or a corner that you guys took. What were the other ones? What started to change this way that you started to experience each other?
I think another one was we stopped looking for so much outside advice from people. I know growing up, when we first got married, I know you and your mom talked on the phone every single day to the point that it weirded me out. I can go a month or 2 or 3 without talking to anyone in my family and feel like I have just fine of a relationship. Mm-hmm. I don't know if my mom feels the same way, but I sure do. And when she would talk to her mom would share her problems with her dad, and then her dad would call her and try and give her all this advice on how to fix her marriage or things that she should be doing differently, and started to get intermeshed in a lot of our problems.
I'd say that you're at point 3.
3.
Because it started out with, I didn't say jack squat to anybody for years, and I internalized it all. And then I emotionally dumped everything onto my parents. And then they were very helpful, and they got us a lot of the resources we ended up needing and using. And then it got too much, and then we pulled back and said, okay, thank you for your help. We are now setting a boundary.
And that boundary was nice. It let us start to live our own life, make our own choices, not have to deal with a third person in the marriage, if you will.
What did the boundary look like?
Oh, that was a hard phone call.
Oh.
It was basically letting them know that they They could choose to share their concerns, their thoughts, their advice with me. However, at the end of the day, he and I were the ones that would make our decisions, and we were not beholden to them for our decisions.
Wow.
And so I remember my dad's the first time I enacted that, like actually got to use it, he was saying, you should do A, B, and C, and then you need to do this, and you need to do this. And he's used to me going, okay, I'll think about that. How do I do that? Okay, thanks, Dad. That's awesome. I'll run with it. And if I don't say that, then he's used to talking me down until I do it. But this time I responded with, thank you. Okay, we'll discuss that and we'll make what choice is best. And he kind of stopped and I could hear him like almost gasp on the phone. And it was just, are you telling me to shut up?
Wow.
And my response was, no, I'm just telling you, we value your opinion and we are going to consider it and really give it the weight that it deserves. And then we are going to make the decision that we feel is best for us. Okay. It threw him off, but it was the beginning of much better relationship.
So you started turning towards each other and becoming a team.
Yeah.
The exact thing that was the scariest thing for you, Robbert.
Mm-hmm.
And even scary for you as well, Kelsey, to be together. Wow.
Yeah.
How did you get to that point in time? Did you just sit down and say, all right, we're going to do things together from now on? Or those turns started happening? And
Not a freaking clue.
I do. we jokingly call it porn rehab.
Yeah.
porn rehab. Okay.
Yes. My ecclesiastical leader helped me sign us up for this group therapy program to help rehabilitate porn users and their spouses.
Okay.
Yes. And so for about a year, we did therapy 2 to 3 times a week.
Wow.
Yes.
In group therapy.
No.
Oh, some was group, some was individual.
He would go to his group with all the other addicts, and I would go to my group with all the other wives. And then on another day, we do marriage counseling. And then sometimes if it was a bad week, then I'd do individual or he would do individual. So it was a lot.
It sounds like a lot. It's over 3 hours a week.
It felt like a lot.
And you were doing 50 hours a week at work still.
Yeah.
And they have 3 kids.
At this time, I'm working
Oh,
I'm working about an hour away from where we live. I work in
geez.
retail hours, so leaving pretty early in the morning, leaving when it's dark, getting home when it's dark, and then trying to still fit this in, still trying to fit kids in, still trying to fit religious commitments in.
And you'd had a change in your work situation by this point, which I also credit for being a big turn in our marriage, because when you were let go, you no longer had the option of hiding from our family at work. And so it forced us to deal with each other, because then it was, all right, so either we're going to divorce or this is going to happen. Let's make it happen.
Yeah.
Wow. So you'd sat down, we're going to do this thing. Changes started happening. So then you're going to therapy, this porn rehab for 3 hours a week. And that changed everything for you?
It taught me the basics of therapy, of self-care, self-love, self-compassion, vulnerability, what it is to have intrinsic rights as a human being, and then what it is to have compassion on somebody who's hurt me. And so we did a lot. I mean, I talked with the other women, created close emotional bonds. Honestly, almost none of those have survived. So that's a little on the weird side for me. But we got really up close and personal. We did some art therapy, which I found really healing. I'm big into artistry. And so one of my favorite things that we did that I found so incredibly healing was to do a loss poster. And so I wrote all the things on this board that I felt like I had lost as a result of this relationship. The ability to trust myself, to trust him, to trust the future, and friendships that I didn't believe in, that I couldn't hold on to, all these things that I had lost. And then at the center, I drew the main religious symbol for my church, and then I wrote in the lyrics to Les Miserables, I dreamed a dream. And when I presented that to the group, I'm a singer also, and I sang that. And it was a very, I don't know, it just felt like a very hallowing experience where I was able to give voice to all this pain, and instead of needing it to go somewhere, to just be able to say it and let it go. Yeah. And I stopped trying to make you hold it for me.
Sounds powerful.
Yeah.
So you were no longer making him hold on to the things that you were hurting.
Yeah.
You started healing for yourself. Robbert, what was going on for you?
There's a lot of basic communication skills that they were trying to teach in these groups, which is where we learned a big chunk of how to be empathetic with someone you've hurt, how to talk to them when you've done something wrong. How not to just say, hey, I didn't mean to do that. I'm sorry. Let's get over it and do something different. But how to acknowledge the fact that someone's hurt, how to acknowledge the fact that they have trauma in their life and you've created some of that, and how to help them move past that moment and maybe spend 5 to 10 minutes talking to them and then it being done, as opposed to fighting for 4 or 5 days and then it being suppressed and then it popping up again in a couple days. So there's a lot of good basic skills that it kind of helped on how to communicate and have healthy boundaries within a marriage.
Really setting boundaries within the marriage was an important piece in keeping you moving.
It also helped teach us to set boundaries with friendships and family members, because one of the things we did was talk about our family of origins. And that's when I first realized exactly how enmeshed I was in mine. In figuring all that out and letting go of our families, we were able to hold on to each other.
Really continuing to move closer towards each other.
Yeah. So that's when I can definitely say things started to turn. Things never got as bad as they were before that.
Okay.
And that was really, really helpful. I kept looking at him and saying that even. It never has to be like it was.
Never has to be that way.
Yeah.
You have a whole new way of communicating and connecting and experiencing yourselves.
And a lot of it was doing things like full disclosure. So it was, hey, I'm going to say all the things that have happened in our marriage, all the things that I've done. We'll say them, and then it'll kind of be just a fresh start from there. So it also was a lot less of a worry of, well, you did this 3 years ago, and then you did this 2 years ago, and now we're going to fight about all this again because you forgot to take out the trash. And that's reminding me on how you don't listen.
It reminds me of that scene in Modern Family when Phil Dunphy is looking at Claire and he's like, I understand the pain is fresh, but the lie is very old. And I was like, he just did it. He got it.
Very much so.
Very much so.
Yeah.
The pain is fresh, but the lie is old. Wow.
The things you learn on Modern Family.
They teach it.
And every now and then I'd still find something. Like we'd be cleaning out the garage and we found a gun that you had purchased and hidden in there so that you wouldn't have to tell me that you had purchased one. And I would look at it. I remember we were moving and we had a ton of people around that day. And I just looked at it, looked at you. I was like, I'm going to be a minute.
I'm going to be a minute.
Went to the bathroom, came back. Let's go. Because again, the pain may be fresh, but the lie is old.
Yes. So you guys go through this program for a whole year.
Yeah.
And then did they give you a cured pornography certificate?
We actually bounced out of that program.
You bounced.
A little premature, if you will. It just hit the point where the basic fundamentals and skills that we needed in a marriage and in a relationship, we felt like we had a good hold on, but some of the concepts and values necessarily that they had didn't flow as much in what we believed in at the time. So we learned some of the basics, some of the fundamentals, but we didn't necessarily need the value system that they were preaching at the time.
Yeah, we were very grateful to them for this new lease on our marriage that they'd given us, but it was time to move on. And that was hard for them to understand. They really worried that they had done something wrong. And instead it was, no, we'd still give you a rave review.
We still had people in our group that stayed for another year, almost 2 years, working through their whole program, if you will, going workbook to workbook and essentially graduating.
And it felt like at that point we were really ready to move on with our life. We bought a house for the first time, moved into a new neighborhood away from the support system that had supported us through the horrific nights, me trying to find some place to go because you were so upset I was scared. It was just, there were so many bad memories. And it felt like we had a fresh start. And in this new place, we lasted, say a good 6 months before it started to go downhill again?
I think it was about a month.
Really?
Yeah, we were still in the move-in process of the new house.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing had led to another, and it got us back in. You look at all the stresses of moving and buying a house and changing everything in your life. And we had just let it build and build and build, and we were so used to relying on going to therapy as much as we were, and that's where we would talk about our problems, that it had almost, in a sense, become a crutch.
Really?
That we had gone, we'd been doing therapy 3 days a week for a whole year, so if we ever had a problem in our life, we just had to wait 2 days, and it would come up in therapy, so why the hell would I talk about it before then? And so it had all just come to a head, and had a big blowout, and
that one, it was another rock bottom where we reached a point. I remember I was certain you were going to hurt me and standing in front of you telling you, if you make that choice, everything we have worked for is done, because that is my line. Mm-hmm. And you turned around and you went and you punched the van. Gave that a nice good dent, which you bought me a new van later when we had the money. But sounds
like a really rough night.
It was a rough night, and I remember calling the police and telling them that you were threatening to break down the door to come back in, and their victim's advocate telling me, well, do you really want us to do anything, because you could really ruin his life.
Wow.
And I was like, thank goodness this is me now, not 3 years ago, because I would really have taken that to heart.
Mm-hmm. Really personalized that.
Yeah. But instead, it's like, okay, you're not going to help me. And so hung up the phone, called my dad, who then started yelling at me for being in that position again. Mm-hmm. And said, you're not going to help either, and hung up. And my best friend ended up calling you. And she didn't normally interject herself into our marriage. That was a boundary we set, she set, everybody was happy with that. Mm-hmm. But that night, she's like, I think he needs me, because she also felt you were her friend too. So she called you. And how did that conversation go?
To be honest, I really don't remember.
Okay.
I don't remember the topics that we talked about, but it was just a lot of talking and what do we do next and where do we go from here type of stuff.
Yeah. But she chilled you out and you came home.
One of the hardest things is I've always been a runaway and you've always been a chaser.
Like a pursuing and withdrawing?
Yeah.
Most of the time it's emotional. Every now and then it's also a physical. I remember at one point, early on in our marriage, right after we had the twins, we were yelling and arguing and I was trying to walk away because I knew I was getting too heated. And I literally started running down the hallway to run in the bedroom and shut the door, and you literally started sprinting behind me and jumped on my back.
I've jumped on your back?
Oh, yeah. To stop me from running away.
You?
Yeah.
Spider monkeyed you.
Dang.
And that night was the same thing. I was trying to leave the house to take a walk and just clear my head, and you had pursued. And when I get in some of those rage moments, I just kind of, you don't think it. You just go primal at that point.
And how scary that can be to feel like someone's leaving you or that you're not going to have the time that you need.
Yeah.
All at the same time trying to show love for each other.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
What would you guys say? When did you start using the skills, or what skills? Like as we were talking before we even set all this up, Kelsey, you had told me that you wanted, or that you were using these skills that Nate Bagley was talking about, even before you'd never even heard of Nate Bagley before.
Yeah.
But when did you guys start using these skills, or how did you start getting to the place that you're at now?
It took two things. One, I became a firm believer in Brene Brown.
Okay.
Okay. Learning to be okay with my own vulnerability, and her book, The Gifts of Imperfections, was huge for me. Then I was able to let down my guard and be able to see those same things in him and provide him that space that he deserved to connect. He deserved safety, connection, that they're the basic human needs. Do I matter? Am I loved? Am I safe? That we could provide those both for ourselves and for each other, and that everything else could be stripped away. And it was, I would say then, the last major catalyst that fell into place was my transition out of my faith. Mm-hmm. And as I struggled with that, it gave me a whole new sense of this role I'd been forcing him to fill in my life. That as I watched how he treated me so graciously as I went through this really big, hard, emotional change, where I felt like this dark hole had opened up under my feet and I had no firm footing and I had no idea what life was about anymore, to have him respond with so much connection and love and understanding. I looked at him and all I could think was, my God, I missed you all those years. I missed this incredible person standing in front of me, because he wasn't this cartoon version of himself I had created in my head. And I fell in love with who he was inside and out for the first time. You might need to refresh my mind, though, on some of his principles.
Oh, for Nate?
Yeah.
Oh, man, Nate, he covered so many different things.
So many. I tried to. I listened to it a couple times just to make sure I would remember, but I
Oh, nor do I expect. I don't even think I can remember verbatim everything we covered in that thing, but I know we talked about what you guys have been talking about the entire time, how you guys work with, you're pursuing, you're withdrawing. How do you guys work after an argument? Like, what do you guys do now? What do you guys see that you do now when you feel like you've got to go after him, or you're like, I got to take off?
So, full disclosure, we're fighting right now.
So you guys put on this really good face of like, hey, we're coming to... Is it because of this interview?
No, there's no face. Fighting isn't scary anymore.
No way. Full disclosure on my end, I had no idea.
Yeah.
I would have never have guessed.
Yeah, it's not a lot of yelling or running or name calling. It's just disagreements. Same way you'd have a disagreement with a colleague and be able to go to work the next day and still function and get things done. Mm-hmm. We know what's important. And to kind of piggyback off the religion part, you know, one of the things we learned in porn rehab, if you will, is that, right, a lot of the problems that come from it is the shame that when she finds out I'm doing it, that's something that's been discovered. So for me, a lot of the religious was I didn't believe in it. It wasn't what I wanted to do, but that was a deal breaker for her. If I wasn't living up to A, B, and C, she was going to divorce me and take the kids because I wasn't who she wanted to be with. And that was never who I was. I bought books, I read stuff, I tried to be well versed in all these concepts. But as soon as getting rid of all that and not having to worry about who I am, I could be me, she could be her, and that's who we fell in love with in the first place. It kind of stripped back down. So at the end of the night now, she's who she is and I am who I am, and you know, kind of like Nate's from his podcast that you guys did, we don't have secrets between us. You know, we tell each other everything. We communicate in those kinds of things. And
he calls me his best friend, and it's not in some cutesy way. It's like he means it when he says it.
Yeah.
And you can feel that.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I have nothing to hide. I'm not worried about telling her something. I'm not worried about any of that kind of stuff.
You can come in, do a podcast, be angry at each other, and know that things are still going to be okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, now we don't need each other to fulfill every need anymore also. Mm-hmm. And so if there's a night where I'm sobbing And he can't. He just can't. He needs to go to sleep. If he keeps talking, he's just going to get more upset, and he knows he's going to hurt me. He can just say that. And I'm not going to ramp things up because, oh, I'm so alone, I'll never be loved. I'm past that. I know I'm always loved. Mm-hmm. I just know I'm married to a human being. And with humanity comes all these imperfections that are totally understandable, and that's why we have a community. You know, we have our parents for the things that they offer. We have our friends, our family. We have our therapists. We have everyone that we have chosen to be in our life at this point. It's because we really do consider them part of our village. And to have that means that he doesn't have to be everything for me, and I don't have to be everything for him. And the release of that pressure has allowed us to love each other as we are. And even though right now we are fighting way more often than we have the past month, this past week has been really difficult. It's still okay because we have been to where it's the end of the world in our marriage. And this is a walk in the park in comparison. This is just two people trying to figure out how to provide for each other in the moment. How do we connect with this new problem we're facing? Because we know that at the end of the day, that's what we want. I'm crying because I want connection. He's frustrated because he's trying to figure out how to give it to me. And that's what it is. Yeah. We trust each other now.
Do you have any things that are go-tos for you to help bring that connection when it does seem frustrating?
Sometimes a big one, especially for her, is there's not necessarily words, there's just physical touch. Mm-hmm. So for some reason, we always seem to be fighting in the bedroom. And it's just not talking, not arguing about anything, just kind of holding her for a little bit until both of us can kind of calm down. And then that lets whatever the issue is at hand kind of de-escalate, lets the energy de-escalate, and then we can get down to the bare bones of what's the problem, talk about it, not so emotionally overcharged, but really look at the situation, find out what's the problem, and try and find out what the solution is.
Mm-hmm. You figured out early on in our marriage that touch was a big love language for me. And so I can remember throughout every phase of our marriage, whether or not you wanted to have sex, that wasn't the issue. It was you would sit there and you would try and rub my feet while we talked, or you'd try and rub my hands, or give me a back rub. And even now, people over at our house, they'll just notice you're sitting there quietly giving me a foot rub while I'm talking and laughing with them. And it's, that's how, one of the ways I really do feel loved and supported. And you go out of your way, no matter where we are. You don't make it awkward. But you make sure I know.
I'm curious as to, now that we've kind of come to where we're at today and how you guys have worked through, just like you said, gone to the very bottom and back. If you could give a recommendation or a piece of advice to couples that have found themselves in your situation or going through a similar situation, what would you tell them to explore, or what would you let them know?
One of the biggest things that I realized in our marriage was it wasn't necessarily that we found the solution, but it was that we were both actively working towards a solution. So we'd try something and it would fail miserably, and it was like, okay, well, that didn't work. What are we going to try next?
Mm-hmm. I would tell people that the things I loved about you was your ability to get back up. You could take a beating and jump right back up and try again. It was incredible. I would tell them, I'm going to work just as hard for just as long until he stops, and you never stop. The other one I'd say is learn to love yourself.
Learn to love yourself.
That's the really big one for me, because I didn't truly learn to love him and see him for who he was until I was able to stop feeling guilty for who I was, for the things I said, the things I felt, the way I fell short, feeling so much shame consuming me. I was one of those people pleasers who I read everything into body language. Somebody looked a certain way. I'm like, what were they thinking? Did I do it wrong? Because I was trying so hard to make everyone love me, I never learned what it was like to truly fall in love with myself and provide that for myself, which meant I couldn't know how to love him. If you've never experienced that kind of love, how do you offer it to someone?
Wow, that's powerful.
Don't be afraid to open up to your friends. Everyone's going through crap in their marriage, their life, their relationships. That's probably one of the biggest things that I learned out of the group therapy that we did, is it taught me to talk to another human being about what problems I was going through. Because before that, I could have been yelling, screaming, fighting, hitting walls, gone to work, and someone could ask me how my marriage was, and I'd be like, yeah, things are good. We're great. Because nobody wants to be vulnerable. Nobody wants to admit that their life's not perfect, but the guy sitting across from you is fighting with his wife too, probably, so having someone to talk to it about, it's helped.
Yeah. But that doesn't mean just go and share with everybody. You had to teach me that one, because you started getting uncomfortable with how open I was. And then I had to realize this is your story too. And so come to an understanding of, we share with the people who have earned the right to hear about these massive things we have done in our life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow. Well, I really appreciate both of you being vulnerable with us and the listeners that are tuning in to hear your story. I mean, this has been powerful, and I really appreciate you taking this time.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're happy to be here.
It's kind of fun. We didn't get to go to Ireland for our 10th anniversary, but we got to do a Birds and the Bees podcast, huh?
Is today the anniversary?
No.
Oh, I was like, oh, now I feel rough.
No, our fourth baby's birthday is our anniversary.
Oh, okay.
So it was also kind of magical to feel like the day we brought our last child into this world was the day that on the day we celebrated the formation of this family. It felt like we came full circle.
Wow. Yeah.
So we were supposed to be in Ireland that day, but happens.
Didn't happen. Well, I'm glad that you're here, and I really appreciate you, Robbert, and you, Kelsey, for coming on the show.
Oh, thanks.
You got it.
Thanks for inviting us.
If you have any comments about about these experiences that you just heard, or if you want to share your story, give me a call at 385-449-1818. Leave a voice message and let me know what rang true to you, or what you enjoyed about their experience, or leave us a review on iTunes, or let us know what you think on the Facebook page. Until next time, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next episode of Birds and Bees Podcast. Wasn't that a great interview? Man, I love interviews like this. Remember, we love when you send these episodes to your friends and family. There's a good chance you know someone who could use some extra support or the information that was just discussed in this last episode. Send them a link, tell them about it. You can send it through iTunes, send them the birdsandbeespodcast.com link. Any way that best will get them the information, and it can help a lot to those that you love. We really appreciate you sharing this. Please consider leaving us a review on iTunes. That helps us immensely with getting this content out. And know that I love you. Love the fact that you guys are helping me out with my goal in sharing this information with the entire world and changing the way that we talk about sexual health and changing the interactions we have with our kids as well as our partners. If you have any questions or you want to join the conversation, send me a call or give me a text at 385-449-1818. Send me an email, birdsandbeespodcast@gmail.com. All this is going to be great. Love to hear from you, Hive Mates. And I look forward to talking with you guys in the next episode. So until then, keep the sexual health buzz alive, and I'll see you in the next episode.